Welcome to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics, the podcast that delves into the power of traditional cattle genetics and the ranchers bringing them back. We're returning to the tried and true practices that prioritize what truly works on the ranch. Each episode, we'll talk to ranchers who are rediscovering the methods that built strong, resilient, efficient, and fertile herds in the 1960s and 70s. These breeders are blending the best of the past with practical solutions for today's ranching world. Whether you're passionate about the future of ranching or curious about heritage genetics, this podcast is for you. Presented by Boss Sires. Tune in as we reconnect with the roots of the herd. Here's your host, Patrick Powers.
Welcome back to Sustainable Stock. I appreciate y'all tuning in. Today I'm joined by Hayes Boyd of Backbone Ranch. Hayes has been focused on reviving and preserving Murray Grey genetics, running a closed herd and building cattle that thrive in low input systems. We're going to talk about the history of Backbone Ranch and his approach to breeding and management and how it aligns with the mission of Boss Sires. Hayes, thanks for being here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you great. Thanks for having me on today.
Yes, sir. Well, rather than me do a poor job of it, how would you like to just introduce yourself to all the listeners and let us know where you're from and what you do?
Sure. So, my name is Hayes Boyd. I am a third-generation cattle rancher up in Ira, Texas, so north of Dallas. And I currently work as a veterinarian at a mixed animal clinic over in Gainesville. So that was kind of my introduction to livestock and kind of growing up around it a little bit. And I've been working as a veterinarian for about a year and a half now. I just graduated from A&M not too long ago.
Okay. Well, do you think you could go a little further on what the history of the Backbone Ranch is?
Sure. Yeah. So, in the 1970s, my grandparents had some property down in Kerrville, Texas, so down in the hill country. And they actually went to a cocktail party in Dallas for Lyndon B. Johnson's tax attorney at the time. And they were told about a beautiful property about an hour and a half north of Dallas that reminded them of the hill country. So they came up on a weekend, fell in love with it, and started buying some land in the early 1970s. So right now, we are about 850 acres, and it's been in the family ever since.
Well, that's awesome. So your grandparents always involved in cattle, or did they buy for the land alone, or was it for the idea of being able to have the country dream of cattle and land?
I think it was really for the country dream. My grandpa really loved the country club lifestyle, but my grandma was actually the one that ran the cattle operation. She raised beef masters, not beef masters, but Santa Gertrudis, Herefords, and Brangus before switching to a primarily commercial herd up until the early 2000s or so.
Okay, so they were commercial cattlemen. They weren't even seed stock at that time.
Yes. No, they were commercial cattlemen, and then they leased the grazing for about 10 or 15 years after.
Okay, so they got out of cows, went into grazing, and then your mother showed interest in having cattle?
Yes. So back when my grandmother was probably about in her mid-60s or so, she decided that she wanted to pass off the reins of managing the ranch to the next generation, which was my mother. She was the one that showed the most enthusiasm of her two siblings at the time for the ranch. And so she took over the grazing and told me at the age of 9 of, hey, I want to raise a breed of cattle that is heat tolerant, that can finish well on grass and has a good disposition. So those were really my parameters for picking a breed for the place back when I was about 9 years old. And so I went to Barnes & Noble, tried to find all the books that I could on cows that compared cattle breeds. And I kind of evaluate them based on those characteristics that she mentioned previously of the heat tolerance, disposition, and carcass traits. And then I wanted something that was maternal, so that could raise a good calf and be easy fleshing. I didn't really want a 2,000-pound monster that was hard muscled and kind of hard doing. And so after about 18 months of research, I told her, hey, we needed Murray Greys. And my mother is also a veterinarian. She'd been practicing for probably about 20, 25 years at this point in time. And she'd never heard of a Murray Grey. So I kind of gave her my little presentation, and we were originally planning to start with a couple of heifers, kind of compare them to the red pole breed actually, and finish out some steers as well. And the first producer that we contacted up in Lawton, Oklahoma, was selling half of her herd due to drought. So we kind of jumped in with both feet, started out with about 10 or 12 mama cows and some heifers. And we've never really looked back. We're up to about 65 producing cows now, and using artificial insemination and embryo to kind of maximize those quality genetics that we found do really well in our particular environment.
Well, that's great. What's funny is one of the stories that I've heard and have stuck out to me about you and your operation is that you went through and found some old genetics, found some old
Yes.
straws, and I was wondering if you might be able to give me that story in full. I've only heard bits and pieces.
Yeah. So this is kind of me being a weird teenager at the time, but I was again researching cattle breeds and ran across a couple old books on the Murray Grey breed when I was about 13 or 14, and we'd already had Murray Greys for about a year or two at this point in time, and I was reading through this old literature, and the cattle that were portrayed in these pictures and in the histories of these various studs in Australia where the breed originated really kind of resonated with me. And those cattle were exactly the type that we were striving to produce. And so just by kind of a fluke, I reached out to a producer up in Indiana and looking for some older Murray Grey genetics just to see if there was anything available from these older bloodlines that I was interested in at the time. And he got us started with a couple of bulls and gave me some old literature on the breed, just in terms of 1970s and 80s breed association kind of newsletters and newspapers that were sent out quarterly. And so I started handwriting these people from these addresses from 30 years ago. Most of them were not still active, but there were a couple producers whose names I still recognized and phone numbers that actually still worked. So I got some more Murray Grey literature through all those letters that I wrote, and a couple producers actually had some semen laying around in an old tank that had never gotten hot, but they hadn't used it for 20 years.
That's
And
wild.
that was kind of the foundation for finding these older genetics. And so some of these bulls that we're utilizing in our breeding program go back to the first Murray Greys that were actually imported as live animals or semen back in the 70s. So we've got ampules in our tanks, so little glass vials that go back to bulls born in 1963, 1965, and 1966.
That is wild.
And, so a lot of those cattle at the time were smaller frame, but grass efficient. They really packed pounds on grass. And so we're also incorporating some of the more modern bloodlines from Australia in particular, that they have the same phenotype that we like. They're a little bit larger in size, but we're trying to create a blend of something that is maternal, that has decent growth, that's not going to be a scale crusher by any means, but it's going to be on that moderate framed, a lot of meat, maternal, and we like cows that can produce up until their teens. And so that's the ultimate goal. I feel like we're on that track right now, but it's been a fun process so far, and I'm really enjoying it.
No, that sounds cool. It sounds like you really found your value in your heritage genetics in the fact that they can finish on grass. Back when those genetics were around, grain wasn't as readily available or as easily moved throughout the country, so they were forced to be raised that way. That's brilliant adaptation on your part. Find cattle from when the world was suited to the kind you were wanting to breed.
Right. And
that is brilliant, man.
It was really those books on the Murray Grey breed that got me down, kind of going down that rabbit hole. And even though, some breeders were using these genetics, a lot of them were considered outdated and not really relevant anymore. A lot of producers are trying to use EPDs or in order to kind of gauge the productivity of their cattle. I personally have never been a big fan of them just because the Murray Grey breed's small enough. They have little accuracy. And so I've really been a student of judging an animal that's on the ground and looking at the dam and say, yes, she may not wean the heaviest calf, but she is one that's kind of gone under the radar of raising something slightly above average, but she's been doing it for 13 years. And we have a couple heifers in her herd that are from her too, because they were good enough to be retained as replacements. And so those are kind of the cows that I like, of low maintenance. You don't really think about them. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, wow, she's actually 12, 13 years old. I never realized that, just because they haven't been causing you problems or anything like that over the years.
That's cool. Well, and the other thing EPDs doesn't show is you can't recognize a drought when you're looking at that piece of paper. But
No.
being in tune with your cows, you can know which girls still gave you that calf that year and who handled it well and still fleshed out. And
Absolutely.
so, no, that makes absolute sense. So, what is your criteria for keeping and selecting bulls as herd sires? You've covered your cows, what you look for.
Mm-hmm. So for the bulls, we like them to be from some of our more productive cows, in terms of, I like to keep a bull from a female that comes from a line of cows that were productive until at least double digits. If a cow is culled from the herd at the age of 6, then she really is not of much value to us, whether that be to a poor disposition, poor udder suspension or attachments, or feet. So really, if we keep a female as a replacement, we don't really intend to sell her until she comes up open when she's 12 years old or something like that.
Wow, that far
so with
out.
the bull, yeah. So with the bulls, we like them to be from those more productive lines. We like them to show masculinity at an early age. I personally like to see a big depth of body, both through the chest and the flank, just because I've noticed a correlation between that capacity and ability to convert grass into pounds of meat. And so that is really what we look for in our bulls. Of course, we want them to be able to handle our terrain. As I said earlier, this land's kind of like the hill country, so they walk up and down cliffs. Not very often, but they have that ability. And we ask them to do it. And so they have to have good feet in order to handle that terrain well. And our bulls, we do ask them some years to cover 40 cows or more. And so they have to have a high concentration of sperm, as well as a good libido too. A lazy bull is not going to get cows pregnant here very well.
Yeah, they got to get around, don't they?
Yes, they do. They do.
Okay. Well, do y'all do? You covered your bulls there for me really well, and I know y'all collect your semen on your bulls for sale, but do y'all participate in any IVF embryo collection? I don't recall.
Yes, so we actually just had our first IVF calves hit the ground within the last 2 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yes. So some of those are from some older bloodlines, and the others are slightly more modern genetics. But the dams from those are the older bloodlines. And so our embryo transfer, like donor females, are ones that raise a consistent calf for us every year, come from a line of productive females, have good udder attachments, easy fleshing, and like I said, raise a good calf every year. And so if there's any black mark against them in terms of questionable disposition, toenails are long, or anything like that, they automatically do not qualify for a donor in our program. And so our oldest donor we flushed last year. This was the first flush, but she was born in 2011. So that would have made her 13 years old at the time that we actually did IVF. We only got 3 embryos from her, but they're in the tank. And like I said, she's been a no problem cow for her entire time in our program. And so that's the kind that we're trying to propagate.
Man, that really sets you apart to me. Just, I'm no cattleman, so I'm getting a new exposure to all this, and I'm trying to retain as much as I can. But it seems to me like a lot of these guys are flushing embryos out of all these young heifers is the common action among these producers here lately.
Yes, I have seen that too personally, but I do like to see what they can actually produce and what they can do with multiple sires before we actually do say, hey, she's worthy of of being a donor, because sometimes you may not notice. She may look picture perfect as a 2 and 3-year-old, but by the time she's 5 or 6, that udder suspension starts to go, her toes start to get long. And then if you did flush her earlier in life, you have a lot of those genetics running around. And so we like to see what they can do before we do designate them as a donor.
I think that's just you doing your due diligence as a seed stock producer, huh?
Mm-hmm. That's our goal, honestly. We don't really want to put genetics out there that we're not proud of.
That's cool. So, can you walk me through a day on your property on Backbone Ranch? What's it like, brother?
Yeah. So right now we're in calving season and we're wrapping up. We do feed hay. We end up cutting hay from our own ranch, so we're not hauling it in from other places. And that's kind of how we figure out how many animals we can carry through a winter. If we don't ever really want to run out of hay, just because we have a little bit extra in case there's a drought or something that we don't really plan for. This year we started feeding hay in about November, and like I said, we're wrapping up now. Some years, in the better years, we may only feed for 60 days, but we want to stay a bit understocked just so we don't end up having to sell a quarter or a third of the herd due to not enough forage availability. But typically, when I'm here during the day or like over the weekend when I'm not at work, I'll check them first thing in the morning, just make sure fences are good, that type of thing. Check salt and mineral, make sure I don't need to add anything there, and just kind of let them do their thing. I mean, I'll walk through them and take photos of ones that I want to post on Facebook or something like that for marketing purposes. Or if we have somebody wanting to buy heifers, I'll get some snapshots of them, their dams, whatever they're interested in, just so they can have as much information as possible. And then we'll check them in the evenings too. But we really kind of let them do their own thing. And I make note or annotations, at least, of during the breeding season, who comes into heat when, so I can kind of know when they're expected to calve, just so I can kind of mentally plan for that. But I love looking at data, and so that's just one of the things I do keep track of here.
That's cool. So pretty dang easy keepers then, huh?
That's the goal. Yeah. Anything that is hard doing is one that is not really built for our program. If a cow struggles to maintain her weight on hay and the grass that's out there, it's only a matter of time before she does come up open or not pregnant. And so those individuals tend to weed themselves out of the herd, especially during the summer months, because it can be up to 110 here, no problem. During the summer months, we'll have sometimes 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so those cows that are not built for the heat really do not excel well here. And they raise small calves that are not desirable for our customers. And those cows themselves often are skinnier. And so those genetics really do not perform well here.
No, that makes excellent sense. Do you feel like there's anything that really sets you apart as a seed stock producer in our area?
For me, at least within the Murray Gray breed, like I said, I've been a student of these genetics for a long time. And so just knowing the performance in terms of reproductive history of entire family lines, I feel like does give us a bit of a leg up on a lot of other producers out there.
No, I fully follow that. Now's your chance to brag. Have you had any really good feedback from anybody, brother?
Yeah. There's one producer in particular that particularly stands out amongst the others just because of kind of the size and scale of his operation. It was kind of a small world type of thing, but his father actually used to manage our ranch for my grandparents way back in the day. And so he bought 4 Murray Gray bulls from us from our first calf prop in 2012. And he knew that they were calving east, so he put them over 100 just crossbred Angus mixed heifers. And that was the first year he did not have to pull a single calf.
Really?
And all those bulls bred everything that they were asked to. He didn't have to pull a single calf the following year. And we actually went to kind of tour his operation in 2014. So when those calves were hitting the ground. And you could pick out those Murray Grey cross calves amongst the rest of the group just because they had, even though they're from heifers, they had some extra class and style to them that gave them, and they had the depth of body and femininity in the heifers, masculinity in the bulls. They were just a level above everything else. And so after that particular experience, he is running a high percentage Murray Grey operation. He's crossing with Red Angus as well, for his sires at least, but he's been a bull buyer for us ever since. And he's partnered up with a butcher in McKinney, Matt Hamilton from Local Yokel, who owns several restaurants in downtown McKinney as well. And they finish out their steers on grain. They've noticed that a Murray Grey, when fed grain, will grade almost as good as a Wagyu, but in half the time on half the feed. And so he now has people coming into his restaurants asking for a Murray Grey steak, and they have no idea what a Murray Grey is.
That's beautiful.
And so he runs about 700 mama cows the last time I checked. And I found that success story to be particularly inspiring to us. And it felt like we were definitely doing things right with our program when one of our bull buyers has that type of success.
Absolutely. I feel like that story really reflects on something that Boss Sires is trying to get through to the rest of the world, that if you can make a cow that can sustain and thrive with low input, when it does enter an opportunity for a high input area like that form of production there, they're only going to thrive even further. But it should not be a requirement.
Yes. No, I agree.
No, that's really good. Along those same statements there, Hayes, how do you feel like you found your way to Boss Sires? Do you feel like there was one or two points that you really aligned with our mission on, or has it been mutual the whole way?
For me, I was introduced to Boss Sires through, we sold some semen to a producer in Costa Rica that Grant was also working with. Okay. And after talking to that producer in Costa Rica, he reached out to me and kind of informed me about Boss Sires, what his goals were, that type of thing. Initially, I was most intrigued by the fact of, hey, this breed is not very well known. They're still relatively new to the United States. I mean, they came over about 50 years ago, and they're not present in many of these countries. And so I thought that would be a neat possibility for the Murray Grey breed, just to kind of gain a foothold in those countries where I believe that they would excel, or even crossing them with some of the local breeds down there, like the Brahmins or the Nelors, that type of thing. But then the more I became involved in Boss Sires, the part that particularly resonated with me most was the fact that there is still countries out there where people do go hungry, and the cattle there are only calving, once every 2-3 years. And so if we're able to, by improving genetics, increase the availability of beef down there and make that a more realistic option for people and actually be able to put it on their plate, I think there's a lot of value in that.
No, that's great, brother. Well, you are a large animal vet, so you encounter, you're speaking about cattle outside of the U.S., so you encounter a lot of full-size cattle through your veterinary work, don't you?
Yes.
Are there some shortcomings in the American beef market that you feel are easily recognized for anybody who's out there currently looking in the beef market?
With regards to the beef market, are you talking about like the actual cattle market, or cattle that are being asked to fulfill those requirements?
Cattle that are being asked to fulfill those requirements. Okay. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no worries. I just wanted a little bit of clarification there.
No, you're good.
One thing I do see quite a bit of issue with as a veterinarian are a lot of feed issues. And sure, I mean, if you finish out a steer at 18 months, you don't really expect them to have many issues with feet. But, people are bringing in these 3, 4, 5-year-old cows that they're actually collecting embryos on and selling for a lot of money. But I see them at the clinic a couple times a year for routine hoof trims. And the fact that we are propagating cattle that are not very sound, it's of concern to me, just because I don't see that being successful when it comes to long-term productivity, especially for the commercial rancher. because they do need cattle that are relatively low input, that still do have a bit of growth to them, that can produce a good carcass. But if the mamas are kind of petering out in their herd because of poor feed, or their bulls are not able to breed the cows that they're asked to because they physically cannot stand on their back legs to breed, I see that being a concern. That's
No.
the biggest issue that I do see at the clinic, if I'm being 100% honest with you.
Yeah, well, Hayes, I think you made an excellent point there, and a lot of people confuse. They think when we're referring to low input that we're only talking about feed. They don't understand that it's also your time and your money. So low input refers to every bit of the ownership of that cow as well.
Yes,
I
it does.
think people need to understand that, and you covered that very well with that last statement. Is that it is another input having to do that, and I mean, you're talking about you named a 3-year-old cow that you're seeing yearly for a foot trimming, and she's passing those genetics on. You're passing
Absolutely.
a required input on to the next generation for the next rancher, farmer, producer to have to handle.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
I know that's the one that's really standing out to you. You don't see any other inputs that are unfortunately being passed along to the next guy down the line?
The other thing that I do see quite often is we do a lot of fertility tests on bulls, and there are quite a few bulls out there that do come into the clinic that, yes, they may pass a breeding soundness exam, but they are conformationally poor. And unfortunately, as a veterinarian, I'm not really able to say, hey, your bull is, sorry for the language, but a piece of crap. You really should not be using this particular animal. He's just going to cause you problems down the line. But I mean, so that's one thing I do see quite a bit. We see a number of bulls that are pushed hard on feed, and then they don't pass a fertility test. And so we kind of see both ends of the spectrum too.
Well, unfortunately, it sounds like a lot of the market has come to the idea that you can feed your way into fertility. And I think you just spoke on the fact that sometimes even that falls short.
Right, right.
So how do you feel like your relationship with Boss Sires can help change the world? I know you discussed you felt the calling to help feed the world, and you feel
Right.
like pairing with Boss Sires could help do that. Was there any other challenges you think this world of cattle faces that you and Boss Sires could help with?
So that's a very, very big question.
Yes,
But
it is, and I
appreciate you
apologize to
asking
word
that.
it that way.
Oh, no worries, no worries. What I've kind of come to recognize is that there's no one breed or type of cattle that will fit every single environment. And so what Boss Sires has begun doing just with the various partners in several different countries is finding those breeders with cattle that do excel in that particular environment. And I think the fact that we're able to recognize those genetics and say, hey, this works well here, this place, even though it's across the world, is very similar. I think those genetics will be of value there. The fact that Boss Sires, in my opinion, has the ability to make that comparison and actually put people in touch with individual producers who are doing the exact same thing that they're hoping to do. I think there's a lot of value in that. And so that's another aspect of Boss Sires that I'm particularly excited about.
Okay, well, Hayes, I know you already have one bull that we're currently getting into the catalog, and I was happy to hear from you yesterday that you're bringing another one along. I was wondering if you
Yes,
could
sir.
give me a little bit of the history on both of those guys.
Yes, yes. So the first bull that we had listed with Boss Sires is BB Uncle Tony. He was actually the second purebred Murray Grey bull calf to be born on the ranch. His dam was she was born in 2003, so that would have made her 9 years old at the time that she had him, and she produced a calf for us up until she was 17 years of age. So she definitely had the longevity there. But he was the first bull that really put us on the map within the Murray Grey breed. We had him genetically tested for tenderness and marbling genes with a company called Identity, and they were able to evaluate certain genes that increase the likelihood of having tender beef and increased marbling in beef. There are, of course, other factors in addition to those genes that do contribute to beef tenderness and marbling, such as management, environmental factors, feed, that type of thing. But those are really the two parameters that we assess for genetic testing, just because it takes a long time for you to select a bull, have his steers, finish him out, and then say, okay, this beef is tough. He's not a good prospect. By that time, he's 6, 7 years old, and you have a lot of his genetics running around. So this particular bull, Uncle Tony, scored in the top 0.5% of all cattle in the U.S. for tenderness and marbling.
That is incredible.
Perfect. Yes, we lucked out with him, if I'm being honest. But he was a perfect 10 out of 10 for tenderness and a near perfect 8 out of 10 for marbling. And so with his dam's longevity, it came as no surprise that real strength was producing quality daughters. I mean, you could go down to the herd at the time and pick out his calves from the rest of the group. And so his daughters were cookie cutter. They had terrific depth of body, wonderful femininity, good, neat, tidy bags. They weren't very big, but they'd raise a big calf. And so the oldest daughter of his now just had an AI sired calf at the age of 11. And she's calved unassisted her entire life. And we're now using one of her sons as a herd bull. And so Uncle Tony was one that really put us on the map within the Murray Gray breed. We had people in Mexico and Costa Rica who have his calves on the ground, and we had inquiries from people as far away as Europe. We just couldn't make that semen sale possible due to some of the export requirements. And then the other bull that we have that we're soon to be enrolling into Boss Sires is BB Backbone's General. He was one of the first AI calves that we had from at the time. She was phenotypically one of the prettier cows in our herd. She was 1,300 pounds, beautiful udder. She raised a calf every year up until, I believe she was 13 or so. I'm just going from memory here. But he was an AI sired calf from an old school bull. And we grew him out until he was about a yearling and sold him to a producer down in the Houston area. And that was kind of the end of that. And then 3 years later, we had a lot of Uncle Tony bloodlines or genetics on the place, and we were needing a bull of a different bloodline. And with the caliber of our herd right now, we really did not want to bring in a bull from an outside producer, just because there are many bulls out there that would be taking us backwards, whether that be in terms of phenotype, feet, carcass traits. So we wanted something that we knew there was quality behind it. And so we reached out to this commercial producer and said, hey, would you be willing to sell this bull back to us? And he ended up selling us General back. And so we had our first calves from him when he was about 5 years old. He's now just turned 10, and we'll be asking him to breed about 20 cows this next year. And he's been crossed really well with the Uncle Tony line of females. He scored 9 out of 10 for tenderness and 6 out of 10 for marbling, so not quite as good as Tony, but we found those lines to be very complementary. And he's more of an all-rounder, producing really good females, and his bulls have been really consistent as well. And so that's his strength over Tony there.
Well, that's cool.
But he's been our go-to heifer bull for years now. And whenever we breed him to the mature cows, we don't lose growth and we don't lose profitability on the calves. So that's been really nice with him too.
Yeah. Not to mention his value to you is he allowed you to maintain a closed herd.
Yes. And so I guess it's technically not quite closed because he did go to another producer for a couple of years. But like I said, we knew the genetics behind him. I thought he'd be a real asset to the program, and he really has proven to be one.
No, that's really neat. Yeah, it's funny, these relationships that you can form with cows.
Yes.
and their prodigy, isn't it?
Very much so. Yeah. No, we've got some that they'll just walk up to you in the pasture, and they've always been that way. And so that's the way we like to keep them. Yeah,
it's really funny how people think they know cows until they have one that's like a puppy dog in your pocket.
Yeah.
Well, I touched on the concept of a closed herd just a little bit.
Yes.
What are the challenges that you face? I think you covered one of the biggest ones right there, was just trying to keep out the bad stuff and figure out what's going to be the strongest thing to maintain what you've already created. But is there anything else that the average person wouldn't think about?
So with those closed herds, or because we've kept our herd relatively closed, We don't bring in outside individuals to from other operations just to I don't want to say keep our line pure because it's not really what it is. I mean, whenever you breed an outside, bring in an outside animal, there is always risk of, hey, they were exposed to some type of respiratory disease that your cattle aren't used to. They may have foot issues that you don't have in the herd that they bring in. They may have reduced fertility that even though they pass a breeding soundness exam, they came from a cow that was culled at the age of 6 because she came up open. And so by keeping the herd closed, we really know the lines that do perform well. And that's what it has been a little bit difficult trying to produce the next phenomenal herd sire for not just our own use, but one that we feel is worthy for collection for international export, just because we are limited in what bulls we can use, what genetics are going to bring our program forward. And so with the closed herd, you do reduce the frequency of disease, and the goal is to reduce the frequency of management that you don't necessarily have to do, if that makes sense.
No, I follow. That makes perfect sense. What would you say the goals for Backbone Ranch are in 2025?
The goals for us right now, kind of looking, I mean, short term, it's, hey, we want to have phenotypically superior calf that has good carcass traits that will have value in herds across the country. Long term, I really want to get our herd to, I want our cows to be extraordinarily consistent in terms of phenotype across the board. We do have some variation within our herd right now. I acknowledge that. But moving forward, I do want to have kind of a whole herd of cows that are 12 to 1,300 pounds on a frame 4 to 5, and that are easy fleshing and have the ability to reproduce themselves within a single generation in terms of consistency. And so, I mean, across every herd, you're going to have some individuals that are stellar and others that produce substandard calves. I believe we've gotten those individuals culled from the herd that produce the substandard calves, but you're always going to have a top half and a bottom half. And so really propagating that top half to get as good as you can get is going to be the ultimate goal. But for us, we want an animal that will be reproductively sound for at least 10 years, whether that be a bull or a cow. We don't want them too big to the point that they're breaking down or structurally, or too big to the point where they can't sustain themselves on grass.
Absolutely.
So trying to find that happy medium is what we're shooting for. And so that's really the ultimate goal for us.
I like it. How do you see your Murray Greys helping shape the future of grass finishing and sustainable ranching?
I mean, this breed right now is known for being moderately framed and efficient on grass. And of course, there's variation within breed or within breeds or within a single breed. And so there's going to be people on both sides of the spectrum. But right now, as a breed, this, especially I feel like here in the U.S., we're a bit more grass centered than some other countries that are bigger into Murray Greys that do have more readily access or easier access to grain, that type of thing. So the ability to finish on grass, their early maturing nature, I think will make them an asset not just to people who are interested in raising cattle on grass here in the States, but in other countries as well.
No, it sounds like they definitely will offer a leg up, just from everything I've heard from you today, and that they're moderate framed, they're naturally fertile, and you've only emphasized that with the work you've done within your own herd. They self-sustain on grass and are easy keepers. And just from the little bit of videos I've seen you among your cows, they seem to be very docile as well.
Yes, I mean we've had a couple animals over the years that they're a pain to get in the lot just because they know that they're going to get caught and they don't like that, so they throw up their head and they run off. And that is something that we grew sick and tired of very quickly.
Yeah.
And so we are still selecting for disposition. But right now, I mean, we got calves that'll walk up to you in the pasture, let them scratch you behind the ears, And I know you don't want a bull that does that, but for calves and cows, it's not a bad problem to have.
Absolutely. Do you have any advice for ranchers or cattlemen adopting sustainable practices or heritage genetics? You're very unique to me, and the fact that you seeked out those heritage genetics, and I'd love to hear you advise the next generation of people trying to do that.
Yeah, so unfortunately, with the heritage genetics, you can't really get more of them because and so my suggestion, if you are looking into regenerative ranching, provide or and starting a sustainable operation, is if you don't have a mentor, finding somebody, even if they are in a totally different state, establish a working relationship with them, whether that be over phone call, a ranch visit, something like that, and see what they're doing in person if you're able to. That is going to be of significant value rather than just picking up cows and throwing them out at pasture and saying good luck. Uh, of finding somebody who does things you want to learn from them. They may not do everything perfect, but there is tremendous value in the information and the knowledge that they do have. And so that would be my suggestion for those people getting started out is find a good mentor. And it may not be the guy down the road who it may not be the guy down the road, period. It may be someone across the state. But finding someone that's got the same values and the same goals as you will definitely get you pointed in the right direction. And if they do have those same values and goals, their cattle often do follow suit. And so if you see cattle that are thriving in a place similar to yours, that's a very good place to look regardless of breed.
Well said. So, I feel like you've really spoken well on what Backbone Ranch's mission and the legacy of it is. But I do have a greater question. In your view, What is the moral obligation of a cattleman to the land, the industry, and future generations?
Wow. It is truly my belief that as cattlemen, we are obligated to not just raise quality cattle for other people, but we need to do it in a manner that allows future generations to not just raise cattle, but do it on the same land that their parents and grandparents did. And so what that means is not overstocking your property, trying to preserve the grasses and the soil in an effort to make sure that the cattle you have now won't just excel, but the cattle that are on that land in the future will excel. And really, our goals as producers for ourselves as Backbone Ranch, but really for anyone who is raising cattle, they should try to create a product that is not just healthy for consumers, but also has, if someone else wants to raise cattle for, say, grass finishing, even if you're a seed stock producer, you do have the moral obligation to create an animal that will allow those people to reach their goals and feed their families if that's ultimately their end goal.
I feel like that's very well said, brother. I've asked that question of a couple people now, and I don't think anybody's answered it any better than the other. I feel like everybody gives me something that just, whoa.
There's a lot of different perspectives of everything, but I was just kind of thinking, we want to raise a product that allows other people to reach their goals too. I mean, we're not just trying to make money quick. And so allowing other people to be profitable is what's going to help everybody in the long term.
Absolutely. I think some people could lose sight that is a job of the cattleman, is to leave meat on the bone and produce a product that allows another person to also be profitable.
Absolutely.
Well, what do you think the biggest takeaway should be, Hayes?
My biggest takeaway, I know I'm biased towards the Murray Grey, but frankly, it's find somebody who you respect the way not just they are as a person, but the way that they treat their animals and the land. Learn from them, and regardless of breed, find something that suits your environment and build off of that. That would be my ultimate suggestion for anyone out there listening.
I think that's very good advice. I think everybody could take a little bit of that to heart and apply it. Okay, well, Hayes, do you have any plugs, social media links you'd like to plug on here?
Even though I'm young and 25, I'm really only on Facebook. We do have a ranch website, backboneranch.com. I try to keep that updated with regards to just semen availability. If we have any bulls or heifers to sell, they're on that list too. And then, like I said, the Backbone Ranch is on Facebook. And so we're posting updates on whether that be breeding season, calves hitting the ground, sunrise pictures, deer, just a little bit of everything just to kind of give a well-rounded experience for the ranch.
Excellent. Well, all of that will definitely be in the podcast description below for all the listeners out there. And Hayes, I really appreciate you taking the time to come on and share your story today. It's been really good about. Yeah, man, it's been really good learning about your Murray Greys. I've been fond of them since the moment I found out about your operation because they are a little bit more moderate frame, and you had a really cool story to me, the way you hunted them out and found them, and I feel like that was very unique.
Why, thank you. Yeah, it was kind of a fluke, but looking back, we wouldn't have done it anyway, like any other way. And I can tell you for a fact that these are the cattle that we'll be raising for decades.
That's beautiful, man. That's great. I'm glad you found your one, man.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Bubba. All right. Well, to everyone out there listening, thank you for tuning in again for another episode of Sustainable Stock. Remember, ranch with purpose and breed for the future. And we'll see y'all next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Sustainable Stock, Reviving Legacy Genetics. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share. Join us next time as we continue exploring the legacy and future of cattle ranching. For more information, visit us at bosssires.com. That's BOSSIRES.com. Or connect with us on Facebook. Until then, stay rooted in common sense and connected to the herd.